On the mainland, it feels like any other tourism destination. Beautiful sights of part of South Africa's landmarks, including the Table Mountain, the Cape Town Stadium that hosted the World Cup, and so much more. However, once the ferry starts to move, reality hits.
From here is a journey that Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and so many others who were tried in the Rivonia trial at the Pretoria High Court had to take to be isolated from the other people.
As the ferry moves on deeper to the waters and the view of the mainland starts to fade from sight, I begin to imagine what went through the mind of Nelson Mandela and his colleagues who were to spend 20 years of incarceration in the cold, isolated island on the Atlantic Ocean, the same that had been used as a labor colony. However, for many on the ferry, most first-time visitors of the island, expectations and thoughts were running through their minds as well.
I expect to see more of history.
It's just the feeling of following the footsteps of great men in Africa, people who showed strength beyond revenge.
To understand a bit more about the heritage of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, and just to see what it's all about, as it's such a landmark and an iconic part of Cape Town.
After 45 minutes on the water, we finally get to the famous renowned Robben Island. Sounds of birds welcome us, with a view of stones making a wall surrounding the boundaries, clearly indicating a hard escape zone. But most visible, the markings on the walls of the men that once were imprisoned here. And as the tourists disembarked from the ferry, the picture craze couldn't be halted, for no one wouldn't want to have a memory of the place. We are welcomed by Jama Mbahyoti, a former political prisoner on this island. Mbahyoti explains to us that the prison was divided into 7 sections: A, B, C, which were single cells, then D, E, F, and G, which were communal or group cells. On entry, cell F is the first side of the prison on the left, plus the football pitch on the right side.
The prison is divided into sections, and that is how we stayed. We stayed as sections, we're not allowed to interact. So Mr. Kathrada, Mr. Mandela, Mr. Walter Sisulu and the others were in B section. B section is one of the single cell sections, and I was in a group cell. So in other words, I never interacted with Mr. Kathrada when I was here.
Cell A and B were used mainly for political leaders, while C was used for solitary confinement.
So that means if someone broke the rules of the prison, then that person will be taken to C section.
Every prisoner who arrived at the island was placed under cell D before they were relocated to other cells basing on behavior while in prison. The cell where one was placed also determined the kind of privileges you would get.
D, we're allowed to write 1 letter a month, to receive 1 letter a month, and to receive 1 30-minute visit a month. And prisoners in Group A were allowed to write 4 letters a month, to receive 4 letters a month, and to receive 4 one-hour visits a month. So that's how those groupings went.
The prisoners were woken up at 5 a.m. in the morning. The cell doors opened at 7 a.m. for breakfast and then taken to work. They had lunch at 11 a.m., then returned to work and back for supper at 4 p.m. before being locked up in their prison cells again. They never worked on the weekends, and when doors were opened at 7 a.m. on weekends, they were allowed to play sports. On entry to cell F, which was a group cell, there are double-decker beds. However, these were only introduced later.
So in a group cell, there were 30 people, 30, when we were sleeping on these mats, okay? When I came here in 1977, there were no beds here in prison. So each prisoner was given 2 mats like those and 3 blankets. And then in 1978, through the intervention of the International Committee of the Red Cross, then we were given beds like those beds.
A group cell would then house 40 to 50 people, depending on the number of decars that would fit in. The group cell also had lockers for each prisoner, which was used to keep their belongings, and an intercom system for communication in case there was a problem with any of the prisoners at night. All this communication was, however, censored.
And then from our side, that is the prisoner's side, we're not allowed to mention anything about the prison or about a prisoner. If one happened to write or to mention a prisoner or the conditions of the prison, what the authorities will do, they will take that letter back to the prisoner and tell the prisoner what to remove so that he can rewrite the letter.
The group cells had toilets and showers. Prisoners were allowed a bath anytime they felt like, unlike in single cells, where you had to be given a bucket for a toilet for the night. When it came to the meals, there was as well segregation, since this was a policy by the South African government. Imagine being locked up in the same cell prison but with different meals because of skin color.
Mealy meal, that's porridge. Colored and Indians only had porridge for breakfast. Blacks had porridge for breakfast and for supper. Okay?
However, there was no prison cell difference for coloreds and Indians, since all were locked up in the same prison, apart from the whites and women.
Female political prisoners serve their sentences at Kroonstad prison. There's a town called Kroonstad, so that's where female prison was. Here in Robben Island prison, only black, colored and Indian male political prisoners. And for people who worked here, only white Afrikaans-speaking males.
Since the prison sentences that were given to these prisoners were long, some didn't make it out of prison. A list of these unlucky ones is displayed in the museum, and their family members can only get to read about them. Not even their bodies were seen.
All the people who died here were never taken to their families, so they were buried somewhere in Cape Town as paupers.
Outside this Robben Island prison stands another distinguished feature, the Sobukwe kennels, where one of the most feared anti-apartheid advocate, Robert Sobukwe, was kept in solitary confinement but permitted certain privileges, including reading books, newspapers, civilian clothes, bread, to mention but a few. He lived in this separate area on the island where he was strictly prohibited from contact with other prisoners. His only contacts with them was through his secret hand signals while outside for exercise. It is speculated that Sobukwe was subjected to this special treatment because the South African government had profiled him as a more radical and difficult opponent than the regular ANC prisoners.
He was a founder member of the Pan-Africanist Congress. He led a defiance campaign on behalf of the PAC, and after being imprisoned for 3 years in Johannesburg, the government felt he was still a danger to the society, and a special clause was passed to incarcerate him on Robben Island. He was actually brought here and placed here under house arrest. So that space where those kennels were in is where he was kept for 6 years. And to think no one was allowed to talk to him and he was allowed to talk to no one, just shows the magnitude of how they feared this man called Robert Sobukwe.
After the 27th of April 1991, there were no more political prisoners on Robben Island. It was later used for common law prisoners, but in 1995, after a reunion of all former political prisoners of the island, it was agreed that the prison be used as a museum, and the last batch of any kind of prisoners was released in 1996 and taken to the mainland. For NBS Focus on South Africa, I'm Mildred Tohaise, NBS Live at 9.